The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here, and those flea-bagging Texas State House Marxists have returned to Austin. I miss them already. But the repercussions of the little stunt they pulled, aided and abetted by governors like our very own Jelly Belly and Kathy Hochul, supported from afar by Patrick Bateman there in California. Those repercussions are still being felt. It's not just Greg Abbott that's looking to redistrict further along. Ron DeSantis, you remember him, he's the governor of Florida, along with his newly minted Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins, who he calls the Chuck Norris of Florida politics, former Green Beret. Anyway, they were on Hannity's program talking about redistricting Florida. And as usual, Ron DeSantis is ahead of the learning curve here and prepared to be impactful.
Florida, we got shortchanged in the census. We're hoping that they're going to be able to do that to give us that extra seat that we should have had. That would obviously force us to have to redistrict. And so we're working with the Commerce Department to see how that's going to shake out. If that doesn't happen, we still have a basis to redistrict in Florida. There's some racial gerrymandering that's still lingering that we have to correct per a recent Florida Supreme Court decision. And, Sean, you know, because you're part of this, Florida in 2020 versus Florida in 2025, you're talking about a big change. So our districts are not properly apportioned. And if we were to do new districts, it would be much fairer representation for the people of Florida.
Well, he's doing Governor Abbott one better. Not only is he going to redistrict, he's going to see if he can add a seat in the process. Oh, man. That's good stuff. Saving our democracy, huh? Governors, Pritzker, Hochul, Newsom. Collin Anderson is an editor for the Washington Free Beacon. He joins us now. Collin, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This seems like it's the trend lines are moving away from Democrats here. They perhaps have overplayed their hand with this little stunt and the celebration of said stunt by those Texas Democrats.
Yeah, there is certainly an arms race underway. I think, unfortunately for the Democrats, there is a pretty broad consensus that arms race is probably in the net going to benefit Republicans. And the reason for that is just when you look at different states and how they do redistricting, where the legislature controls it and which party controls that legislature, Republicans just have an advantage in those circumstances. And so, you know, if what the Dems want to do here is an all-out redistricting war, it seems like they can have it. And we're seeing a number of red states say, actually, we can do this too. I think the party is pretty confident that at the end of that arms race, they're going to end up on top.
And there's also repercussions down in the state of Texas because the Attorney General there, Ken Paxton, is going after Dem celebutant Bobby O'Rourke and his PAC. He's suggesting that O'Rourke has criminal exposure for what he did to aid and abet the flight of those Texas State House Democrats because a court had enjoined him from raising money for the purposes of providing travel and expense reimbursement and so forth. And he did it anyway because, as he famously said at that little rally he had, F the rules. Well, that certainly would be an interesting shoe to drop if you saw a criminal prosecution of a former leading light of the left in Texas.
Yeah, look, I mean, what we know here is that in the wake of this last walkout, this last little stunt out of Texas, there were new rules passed in which members who leave the state legislature to break quorum are subject to $500 a day fines. the governor, Greg Abbott, was very straightforward in saying that he also believes, based on these rules and on Texas state law, that those sort of outside groups that are fundraising for these lawmakers are running afoul of those rules and those laws. Beto very, very openly said he was doing this using his PAC. They had a very expensive private jet that they took at around $15K an hour, and it appears that Beto took credit for funding these things. And so, based on his most recent statements, I guess they're going to have to follow the money to see whether that ended up, putting dollars in the coffers for the walkout.
Just on the topic of gerrymandering as it pertains to Illinois, I mean, sort of piling on to poor Governor Pritzker here, him doing most of the piling on himself, actually, in his performances on Colbert and Meet the Press. But you had a piece. I mean, I know the Illinois redistricting process pretty well, and I know the maps pretty well. But I didn't know what you reported on, which is that there's sort of a unique example of how badly the districts in Illinois and Chicagoland are gerrymandering, and it has to do with representation of O'Hare Airport.
Yeah, so on a very general level, as you know, you have a number of House districts that sort of start in the Chicago metro area and kind of snake in this very tentacled way out toward the suburbs, because you have to pack as many of these people into separate districts as possible. And so what that has meant is that O'Hare actually encompasses two different congressional districts. And so depending on the runway that you land, if you are flying into O'Hare, there are some runways in the 3rd Congressional District. There are some runways in the 5th Congressional District. The main terminal is in one. Some outskirts of the airport is in the other. And so most recently, when you had issues with United delaying flights, technical problems, et cetera, you had this big backlog that meant that actually United was parking planes in areas of the airport that were in one congressional district, and then other areas of the airport in entirely another. And it's very much a representation of what Pritzker has done here and what he is now saying actually no is not gerrymandering.
Yeah, the only problem with that is that even as you move from one congressional district to another, as you ambulate around O'Hare, the representation doesn't get any better. So there's nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide. Speaking of Pritzker, what's your assessment, just as a keen observer of the passing scene, in terms of his profile within the party when the conversation turns to possible nominee in 2028?
Yeah, look, I don't think most are talking about him as a sort of bona fide front runner right now. I think there are two things with Pritzker that you have to look at as advantages. The first, of course, is that he is wildly wealthy, and this always can go a fairly long way in a presidential campaign in terms of where you can go and resources that you have access to that others may not. I think he's trying to sort of show that he's one of the Democrats right now that's fighting and getting angry and really spearheading an aggressive push. That seems to be what the party, at least among primary voters, want right now. I'm not sure, though, that anything that he is doing in 2025 sticks 3 years from now. I think that seems unlikely.
And I mean, there really is no putative front runner on that side, right? I mean, it's all based on sort of thinly sort of skin deep name ID. And even then, you're pretty bunched up.
Sure, yeah, and so that's the thing is, you have a lot of folks like Pritzker who are right now trying to get in the press, show that they are really doing things to fight, because you hear the primary electorate on the left right now say, hey, you guys have a lot of talk. What are you doing? And so I guess in the case of the Texas Democrats, you have Pritzker saying, well, what I'm doing is giving a state of refuge for these lawmakers, and look at me and let's do some press. I'm not quite sure how well that plays out in the long run if Texas ends up passing these maps anyway.
And if Texas ends up having those maps, does that compel Jasmine Crockett to go up or out and run for Senate?
That would be very interesting. I mean, well, Crockett is one name, but also we've discussed earlier this morning Beto O'Rourke, who, I can't imagine someone spearheading runs for Senate, governor, and president, losing all of them, and then saying, let's jump back in to another very highly targeted Senate or gubernatorial race. But now he is potentially rumored with doing that. And it seems that, like Pritzker, he is trying to assert himself in this moment as well to pick up some support. That's another name that I'll be fascinated to see what happens.
Collin Anderson, editor for the Washington Free Beacon. Collin, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer. Don't miss In Grace with Pastor Jim Scudder Jr. Now heard on Sunday mornings at 7:30. Tune in and find hope as Jim Scudder explores God's Word and His world each Sunday morning right here on AM 560. The Answer.
We ran the numbers and determined the overseas furniture makers are paying an extra 38% to package and ship their iffy furniture